Hello, everyone. This is Rebecca Ferreira, and I am going to be talking to you today about just an introduction to what philosophy is, talk about the Bertrand Russell reading, Value of Philosophy, and then provide a little bit of an overview for the introduction to logic. So, to start off with some terminology, first things first, regardless of which philosophy class of mine you are in, I always operate under the presumption that students do not have any prior familiarity with philosophy. So if you do, that's just an added bonus. So under that presumption, philosophy as a literal definition comes from the Greek word philosophia, which I thought I had here, but I do not. I think I might have it in some other PowerPoints, depending on which class you're in. But philo means to love, and sophia means wisdom. So in Greek, right, this was referring to that sort of ancient lifestyle of sort of being inquisitive and asking questions, and people unfortunately are not as easily able to make a lifestyle of that today, with myself as a possible exception. But people typically in this line of work might end up becoming lawyers, right? Working on hospital ethics boards, being hired at think tanks, right? Coming up with policy ideas. The basic idea, right, is thinking outside the box, which is often why critical thinking skills are so closely aligned with philosophy. But that, again, refers to philosophy as a way of living. The academic discipline of philosophy is a little bit different in the sense that it's something that one can study without actually having to practice, right? So unfortunately, we all know that just because someone has a lot of knowledge doesn't necessarily mean that they live by, right, what they know. And so as an academic discipline, philosophy has lots of different definitions. You probably couldn't get any two philosophers to agree on the same definition. But we're going to operate with a basic sort of simple understanding that will help govern the way that we approach the class. And so that is the study of general and fundamental problems in the form of questions, right? So what that means is that we're going to be looking at issues, right? So unresolved issues in the world, although oftentimes philosophers might even ask questions to things that we think are resolved, right? Things that we haven't even thought to question. So sometimes it's a matter of uncovering, right? Problems that no one even knew was there. And then again, approaching them by asking questions. And so this ends up being an important part of understanding what philosophy is, but it's also something I want to focus in on because I think it will help us get an idea of what we can expect to get from this class. So what I mean by that is that in a typical class, say if you were taking a math or science class in college, right, your instructor asks you a question and there's usually one right answer. And the idea is that the instructor will teach you how to get from that question to the answer so that you can apply it in new situations. Philosophy, even though it too deals in questions, is different and often frustrating because we don't often know what, if any, answers there are, or if we do, we don't know which is the correct answer. And so philosophy is often left with the very, very frustrating task of dealing with those questions which have yet to be resolved, of which there is yet to be a satisfying consensus about. And so because of that, philosophy is really, I know people like to say physics, right, is the mother of all disciplines, but philosophy is quite literally the parent of all academic disciplines in that it was the first form of higher education. So in ancient Greece, right, we had individuals of the upper class, right? These would have been the Athenian men, white, right, very privileged, who were capable of hanging out in the agoras and the marketplaces during the day and asking questions. And so these individuals, right, would often go into politics and become great leaders and carry great sway. And so asking those questions, right, is going to be at the very foundation. But as we started to, of course, improve in our technology and make progress, right, the idea was that we were sort of answering these questions, right? Not everything was going to remain a mystery, and that's how sciences emerged, right? Scientists used to be called natural philosophers. It's how psychology emerged, right? As well as other areas, social sciences and whatnot. So as you'll see in the Bertrand Russell reading, right, everything in academia emerged when we had an answer to the question. So philosophy today is really just the remaining unanswered questions. And so again, to tie this, to your overall education, if you think about all the different degrees that you can get in college, the highest degree that you can get is a PhD. And most people don't even realize that that means that you are, no matter what discipline you enter into, becoming a doctor of philosophy if you earn the highest degree possible, right? So everyone who has a PhD is a doctor of philosophy regardless of their discipline, because again, right, those questions that they are answering emerged from the philosophical discipline. So if you're an inquisitive person, I'm hoping that you will really enjoy this class, but we do have to be ready for, again, that frustrating point, which is that we might not be able to have those solid answers to the questions, and we'll talk about that more with Russell. So what is a philosophical question? Well, what we typically mean is something that arises from the critical examination of our ordinary beliefs. And I'll talk about that more in a second, but the basic idea again is that we're looking at things that are maybe most often taken for granted, that maybe we have made presumptions about or just accepted at face value without ever having even wondered about, let alone questioned in a critical fashion. And by critical here, we don't mean, in a nasty sort of way. We mean in that we are critiquing, we are being inquisitive and curious, right? Intellectually curious. We're human beings with a rational mind, right? And so we want to understand the world around us. And so asking questions in philosophy is going to be an absolute necessity. And I should stop here for another moment, because in the day and age that we're in, many people often think that asking questions is a form of insult.